to be DCEU or not to be DCEU? Well, I thought it was the latter, more or less. I mean, to be fair, at the outset, James Gunn did tweet that, well, some elements will change and some won't. And everyone figured, well, he's talking about Peacemaker and all that stuff. But it seems to be a little more, and it's curious. It's just, what the hell's going on? Now, things have happened since his announcements about DCU. Shazam flopped, and then The Flash spectacularly flopped. More so than even I thought. I didn't think it would do what they needed it to do, but I thought it would do better than it did. And that's, but then again, it had an uphill battle thanks to primarily Ezra Miller's scandals. It's a butchered film from 3 different versions of it, and then because of 3 different regimes, and then the announcement overall that these are dead-end movies by James Gunn himself. So that hampers the remaining, which is Blue Beetle and Aquaman. Probably more harm to Aquaman than Blue Beetle, because there again, that's another one that's being gutted. Batman was supposed to be in it, or at least Bruce Wayne. First Michael Keaton, then Ben Affleck. Okay, no Ben Affleck, no Batman, nothing. And, there you are. But the right off the bat, the first announcement that was taken really hard, I didn't particularly like it myself. Henry Cavill no longer being Superman, especially after they had announced he's back as Superman. That just made it worse all the more. Can't hold James Gunn responsible for him being announced as coming back, but still, and why? He says it's a creative decision because he needed a younger Superman. I don't believe that for a second. There's a lot of things going on here where it seems, I mean, they did say they wanted Ben Affleck to direct, and he bailed and said he wanted nothing to do with it. He didn't like what the direction they're going, what have you. But it's odd if they just wanted him to direct the Batman film rather than be Batman in it, especially since he announced it's going to be this father and son story. So this is an older Batman. I mean, is Damian Wayne going to be 10 years old in the movie? I would have thought at the very least in his teens for this film, so it seems like, why did Henry Cavill have to go? I don't think we know. I assume it's the money, or just that he's tired of being jerked around by this situation. Back and forth and back. They got him back in the suit for Black Adam. He's like, here we go, ready to go. Boy, ideas for Man of Steel 2 sounds cool. No, it's taken away. And he said, all right, that's it. Maybe that's the deal, but probably more to the money, because it would seem like, because of the situation that Warner Brothers is in, that going with a younger, cheaper star would make sense. I don't like it, but I could respect that. That's the situation they're in, and really, Gunn and Zaslav inherited this, and so in that situation, that's probably more than likely how that goes and plays out. But meanwhile, there is a past relationship between Gunn and Zack Snyder. James Gunn wrote Snyder's first big film, Dawn of the Dead, the remake of the original, and it's great. It's one of my all-time favorite zombie movies. And so, what if they teamed up and stuff? What is the likelihood? Well, he's doing his own take on Star Wars, more or less, with Rebel Moon and all that stuff. But so was there any, hurt feelings there that the potential for a Zack Snyder return was squashed by Gunn's plans here? And it seemed like perhaps that was the case. Maybe Snyder just figured, well, that's the way it goes, and he's moving on, and holds no ill will towards Gunn. And this is a different regime with Zaslav and the like. It's not the same people who he didn't care for anymore, and that sort of thing. But since then, Snyder recently tweeted out support for the Blue Beetle, and got a lot of attention for it. more so than Gunn gets for his tweets. And so that has to have some kind of impact. And why did he do that? What connection does he have, or is he friends with people involved in it? And he decided, yeah, I'll promote that. Apparently, the image that was the first time it had been seen, so they gave him that, and so he did this to stay in good with him, perhaps. And so, oh boy, does this mean? I don't know. One of the theories going around is Zaslav wants to get Christopher Nolan back in the fold, and you can certainly understand why. But Christopher Nolan is really good friends with Zack Snyder. He's the one who hired Zack Snyder for Man of Steel and all that. And not too happy with the way Zack Snyder was treated. Certainly not too happy about his own situation with Tenet and how it was released on HBO Max at the same time and all that stuff. That really, he'd had enough and he left. So it might be part of the deal is I want you to treat Zack right. I mean, is it a package deal? But how would that work? The sale of the Snyderverse to Netflix and all that. First of all, I think that would take some sugar daddy out of nowhere to finance it. But even at the same time, you still have the conflict where you have two DC properties competing with one another on a grand scale. It'd be one thing if it was just one movie and it's one and done, and there's your Elseworlds thing, and there you go. Great going, Zach. And then they get back to Superman Legacy and so on. But to have a Henry Cavill Superman property and a David Cornsweet Superman property, how do you navigate that? Now, that would take some creative thinking there between the two. And if Snyder and Gunn did team up again, perhaps they could weave something out of that. Perhaps having Superman films bookend with young Superman and old Superman. Well, I don't know if Cavill would be interested in that. And Cavill himself just might, look, I'm done. Good luck with that. But, maybe. I don't, But that would be the only thing there, is that the Nolan factor plays a huge role. Perhaps, it's guessing. But you say, well, they want to be rid of Snyder because he failed them. He cost them money with DC. And I never really bought that. I think they panicked over it not making the Marvel money at the time. But it didn't, to say it lost money for them, I don't think was enough, unless there was more expenses we didn't know about. Wasn't really sure. Well, somebody who is in the know opined on this, because on Twitter, where all the important discussions are, somebody said, hey, it's always funny to me that supporters conveniently forget how much money Zack Snyder lost for WB. Big hit with 300. Then they handed him DC, and he didn't lose much money there, or I think he meant make much money there, because he's defeating his own argument there, or build a big winner, but 3 or 4 losers in between. Bro power, whatever. So Greg Silverman, responded saying, not true. We lost money on Gahul. I think that was that animated owl thing. I never saw it. That's the one thing of Zack's I didn't see. But yeah, apparently it was quite the bomb. Bombed in a bad way, I mean. And a fair amount on Sucker Punch, which until Army of the Dead was, I thought, Zack Snyder's worst movie. Looked spectacular. Looked cool. And the girls were really great, too. Army of the Dead looks cool, too. He's really taken to that volume technology and stuff very quickly. He's good at that. But story-wise, it's terrible. Sucker Punch wasn't so great, but it's not as bad as Army of the Dead. But anyway, Army of the Dead might have done well. I don't know. But Sucker Punch, yeah, it flopped. And so there you go. And he says the rest of his films at WB were very profitable. Very. So, didn't cost them money. Just didn't make the money they wanted it to. And it wasn't making the Marvel money. And so that, I think they kind of panicked on that. And so, Zaslav knows numbers, so he might have looked at that and he's like, well, he's not that much of a threat. Or a risk, rather. But at the same time, he comes back to, can you afford the scale that Zack Snyder would require on that. But does he have creative ways to make movies look good without, on the cheap, perhaps something of that nature? But it's the bit of what would draw the audience and what would get its excitement. And there is a split in DC fandom. Some serious DC people hated what Zack Snyder did. Can't stand his Superman. Like Henry Cavill, but don't like the way he was written in the story. Ben Affleck's Batman, some of them had problems with that too, and that sort of thing. And that everything's dark and dour and everything. All that sort of stuff. But I gotta say, between the camps, it just seems there's more enthusiasm for anything DC that involves his version, at least, and certainly that cast, than the alternatives, which have been pretty piss poor. And you're trying to revive this entertainment company, and made a big deal at the outset anyway of DC. What gets the most attention and excitement still seems to remain Snyder's venue of this. And so maybe there's something there. Saw the video by Ping Pong Flicks, who suggested, this isn't anything that is rumor enough, I think it was just his suggestion, that Zack Snyder would be a good director for the Authority movie. And I would certainly agree to that, and that would be a good team up between Zack Snyder and James Gunn, except I would rather the Authority movie be an Elseworlds movie, its own world, not something shared with Superman and the like. I don't think it works that way. But yeah, that would be pretty spectacular too. So maybe it's something on par with that. They want to make good with him and that sort of thing. At this point, unless they just suddenly scrap everything, and sorry, Dave, Corn Sweat, I know we told you that, but then we told Henry he was back, but then we decided he's not. We decided he's back again, and you're not. Yeah, but, and then Gal Gadot says Peter Safran and James Gunn want her to be in Wonder Woman 3. So if it's a break, then you say, okay, a reboot, that makes sense. Just scrap it and start over. I could understand that. But this is more than just, well, I want to keep Peacemaker and stuff like that. But the Justice League people, they'll all be new, and then, well, not so much. Clearly, a lot of things aren't immediately set in stone because there's things beyond their control, or should have been in their control. I mean, announcing your remaining movies are dead ends wasn't a wise decision. But I appreciate the honesty, more or less, but I don't know. You know what? Maybe what they should do, this would be incredibly ambitious and difficult to pull off, and again, would require a sugar daddy to fund it, but they could just go back basically to the structure of DC Comics the way it was before Crisis on Infinite Earths, where you had an Earth 1 and an Earth 2, and Snyderverse is Earth 2, and David Cornsweet is the younger Earth 1 Superman, and then eventually the two universes come together in a Crisis on Infinite Earths. Yeah. See? And so you got Snyderverse over at Netflix that they license out, and they're building their Superman over at Warner Brothers proper. And then the two come together in some form of fashion, even to the point of Zack Snyder's storyline where Batman dies in the battle with Darkseid. Well, that would fit too, because in the old Earth 1, Earth 2 deal, the Earth 2 Batman died. He wasn't around anymore. Not against Darkseid, but still, and then the other universe, there's a Batman, and all that stuff, and maybe even introduce that, yeah, he had a daughter and stuff like that. But anyway, see, there's something. But again, boy, that's going to take a massive sugar daddy, and in the face of superhero fatigue, which is more Marvel's fault than theirs, boy, it would be a hard thing to pull off, But yeah, it's probably the only way to have both versions of this to work. yeah, highly unlikely. But anyway, just some thoughts on these strange happenings with the DCEU with a little bit of E still hanging on in there somewhere.